let's dispense with the long-winded intro and get straight to it. This is the brand new Yeti SB150. It's a replacement bike for the current SB5.5, and while it's still got 29-inch wheels, the travel's been pumped up from 140mm to 150 on the rear. Now, we've actually had this bike for a couple of days, and we've measured it in the workshop, and I measured the travel at 149mm, so it's bang on the money. And I've been measuring a lot of bikes recently, and most bikes don't have the travel they claim, so I was pretty pumped that this bike's actually delivering the full quota. To make the Yeti range a little bit easier to understand, all of the new 29ers have the travel in metric, so like it's 150mm, whereas the 27.5 bikes are still in inches, so you have like the SB5 and the SB6. That's a trend that started with the introduction of the SB100 a couple of months ago, and I hope it's one that Yeti continue with because it makes it way simpler. It's not just the name and the travel that's changed on the new SB150, the geometry and sizing's been updated too. So the bike we have here is a size L, and it has a 480mm reach measurement. So that's like 10mm shy of the equivalent size Mondraker Foxy 29, and it's exactly the same as an XL Capra 29. So I'm 5'11", and this bike actually fits me better than either the Mondraker or the YT. And it seems to have a better balance of like maneuverability and stability, just because the sizing's kind of like, it's a little bit lower than the Capra, and it's a little bit shorter than the Mondraker. Standover in this bike's really good too, and the new position of the shock, it's higher up. So with the kink in the down tube, you can get a full-size water bottle in there, even with a coil shock. So Yeti still uses its Switch Infinity suspension layout, and for something that's actually quite a complex design, this bike was surprisingly easy to set up. The key difference between this one and previous version is that the shock's now driven off like a little extender yoke, and that's given it some more progression. And like when I first rode this bike with the Float X2, I was a little worried that sometimes that shock can be too linear, can bottom too easily on bikes, but on this bike, the progression rate feels absolutely spot on. Yeti's running a 170mm travel fork up front, and we actually measured the geometry too in this bike in our workshop, and the head angle is like 64.3 degrees, which is pretty slack for like a 150mm travel 29er. It also quotes a 77-degree seat angle, which is super steep, but that's actually the effective seat angle, not the actual seat angle. The actual seat angle is closer to 72 degrees, which is great because that's a lot steeper than most 29er enduro bikes. So a consequence of that is that I didn't have to push the saddle all the way forward on the seat post just to get the nose of the saddle over the BB. So you're just in a much better position for climbing like instantly on this bike. And boy, does this bike climb well. I'm not a big fan of grinding up steep pitches, but this bike is so efficient that like it actively encourages you to just dispense with every climb. Out of the saddle, seated, it doesn't matter. It's just so direct. The first climb out on the first ride that I did, I used the little climb switch here on the shock, which helps like increase the compression damping. I turned it off for the first descent. Never used it again. There's just absolutely no need for it on this bike. And while the SB150's been billed as like an out-and-out enduro bike, it has been toned down a little bit for the end user. The harder compound Maxxis Aggressor rear tire with the EXO casing wouldn't really be our first choice if we were going EWS racing, but it does roll fast, and it's a good compromise basically if you're doing more like trail riding rather than racing. Another small difference from what the race team would use is this bike comes with a 30-tooth chainring. And like someone like Richie Rude with like his huge quads and like massive power output, he'd spin that out in like a couple of pedal turns. So you'd probably see him using maybe like a 36 or even going up to 38. And like while that'll change the interaction between the chain forces and the suspension and probably give the bike a better bias for downhill, I think this is a really good compromise on a bike that like normal guys, like old guys like me are going to be riding. So this particular model is the XO1 Eagle Race. It's not actually available in the UK, but the model down from it is. The only real difference is that it comes with XT 4-piston brakes rather than the Avid codes. And it gets the heavier DT Swiss 1700 series wheels. All in, build kit's pretty good. Got an 800mm bar, and in fact with the Ergon grips, it actually comes to 810. And when I was out riding yesterday, I clipped a tree with these bars. I mean, it scared the hell out of me. Luckily, it was the tree hitting the grip, not my finger. But again, I'm happy with that because if you're riding big, wide open trails on a 150mm 29er, the wide bar gives you loads of stability. And if you're in the woods riding tighter stuff, well, you just take a hacksaw to it and cut the bars down to whatever you want and just shift your grips in. So definitely a good part of the spec. I mean, we've looked at testing like Yetis in the past, and I've always been put off by the geometry. BBs have always been high, top tubes are pretty short. I mean, in fact, I'd look at the numbers and be like scratching my head thinking, how the hell does Richie Rude ride these bikes so bloody fast? But with this new bike, Yeti's got the geometry and the sizing to match its suspension performance, and it's a bike I'm super excited about testing. I mean, I've had one ride on it already. I've been pretty blown away. One, by how well it pedals. Two, like the suspension feel, it's poppy, it's dynamic, it's lively, it's got tons of grip, doesn't feel too stiff. Three, geometry and sizing, just absolutely spot on, especially for me. So if we'd had this bike in our boutique bike test last month, I'm pretty confident it would have cleaned up.